After World War II, the United States entered into a period of rapid technological advancements in a variety of fields, including chemical pesticides. The post-World War II baby boom brought an increased demand for food production. The United States Department of Agriculture encouraged pesticide use on crops to maximize food production. The pesticide industry soon became the fastest-growing industry in the country. Until the 1962 publication of the book Silent Spring, there was little awareness about the dangers pesticides pose to public and environmental health. The publication of Silent Spring was a turning point for environmental consciousness, creating public awareness about the dangers of pesticides and sparking nationwide environmental change. Following World War II, the use of pesticides to eliminate pests was widely accepted by the public. Pests were viewed as a great threat that needed to be eradicated. In the mid-1950s, 600 to 900 million pounds of pesticides were sprayed annually in the U.S. In 1954, the first regulations regarding pesticides were created, but only dealt with chemicals that came in direct contact with food. DDT, one of the most popular pesticides, was first synthesized in 1874, but was barely used until 1939 when Swiss chemist Paul Mueller discovered it killed insects. In World War II, pesticides wiped out insect-borne diseases and saved countless lives. DDT was responsible for almost completely eradicating malaria in the United States and saved millions of dollars in decreased crop loss due to pests. DDT advertisements focused on home pest control and glorified it as protection against disease. Instructions on safe household use warned only that some products contained a mild poison, but are safe when used according to directions. It was sold in grocery and hardware stores, as ingredients in paint, furniture polish, and fabric treatments, and was even sprayed in hospital kitchens. DDT and other pesticides were very effective, and few people questioned their safety. Rachel Carson earned degrees in biology and zoology before working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Between 1941 and 1958, Carson published a nature-themed trilogy about the sea, all of which were New York Times bestsellers. The Sea Around Us was on the New York Times bestseller list for a record-breaking 86 weeks and won the 1952 National Book Award for Nonfiction. The success of her books built up her reputation in the eye of the general public as a reputable scientific source. Though the perils of DDT and other pesticides were not generally known, there had been experiments as early as 1945 that exposed DDT as toxic to animals and humans when ingested. Chemical companies worked to prevent these dangers from being widely known. If someone questioned the safety of pesticides, they would be attacked both legally and personally. The manufacturer's strong financial support of politicians in Washington prevented official investigations of pesticides. Carson was aware of the experiments, and on August 10, 1945, she issued a press release through the Fish and Wildlife Service to owners of fish processing plants, outlining the dangers of DDT. In 1947, Carson visited the Patuxent River Research Refuge, where researchers found that animals with exposure to DDT have excessive nervousness, loss of appetite, tremors, muscle twitching, and persistent rigidity of leg muscles that continues through death. Wildlife, especially birds, were affected even into the next generations due to lack of reproduction. The Fish and Wildlife Service stated that natural predators, not chemicals, were most effective in pest control, and that the use of pesticides could harm more than help. In the mid-1950s, a bird sanctuary in Massachusetts was sprayed with DDT. The owner, a close friend of Carson, wrote describing the deaths of nearly all wildlife in the sanctuary. Carson felt that the issue of chemical pesticides needed to be addressed and began to research what was to become Silent Spring. Silent Spring was first serialized in The New Yorker in June 1962. The title refers to a barren world in which songbirds no longer live due to overwhelming use of pesticides. Carson created a powerful and persuasive story that aroused public interest, but there was controversy surrounding the book even before publication. The book received favorable reviews, but chemical companies were furious. Carson's publisher, Houghton Mifflin, received numerous threats of lawsuits and demands to abandon publication. Perhaps Carson's most prominent critic was biochemist Robert White Stevens, a professor at Rutgers University who worked for American Cyanamid, a producer of pesticides. He traveled the country giving lectures as a spokesman for the chemical industry with the main goal of discrediting the evidence put forth in Silent Spring.
The major claims in Miss Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, are gross distortions of the actual facts, completely unsupported by scientific experimental evidence and general practical experience in the field.
The North American Chemical Association spent $250,000 to fight Silent Spring. One company, Monsanto, sent out pamphlets called The Desolate Year, illustrating a world without pesticides that caused insect swarms and decimated crops. Despite this opposition, Carson's message was being heard. Once published, Silent Spring was an immediate success, selling 65,000 copies in the first 2 weeks. At a 1962 press conference, President Kennedy was asked about the dangers of pesticides.
Have you considered asking the Department of Agriculture or the Public Health Service to take a closer look at this?
Yes, and I know that they already are. I think particularly, of course, since Miss Carson's book, but they are examining the matter.
The next day, he formed a committee to investigate pesticide dangers. 7 months later, the committee announced that all major facts in Silent Spring were true. 40 state legislatures introduced bills regarding pesticides by the end of 1962. In response to Silent Spring, Rachel Carson was asked to testify before the U.S. Senate's Committee on Commerce on June 4, 1963. Following the publication of Silent Spring, regulation of pesticides and development of new laws led to changes in the very structure of the government in dealing with the environment. Silent Spring also spurred growth in the environmental movement. In part due to the impact of the book, by 1969, memberships more than tripled in environmental organizations that were formed in the Progressive Era, like the Sierra Club and the National Audubon Society, expanding environmental awareness and activism. Carson's work led to the creation of new non-governmental organizations such as the Environmental Defense Fund in 1967, which was founded specifically to protect humans and wildlife from DDT. The environmental awareness created by Silent Spring also influenced the creation of new environmental groups including Friends of the Earth in 1969 and the Natural Resources Defense Council in 1970.
In the years that immediately followed Silent Spring, the Interior Department began to enact their own regulations to reduce pesticide use on public lands, and that continued on through the 1960s and into the early 1970s. And we also had, the emergence of the environmental movement in the years after Silent Spring, with the adoption of the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act and the Endangered Species Act.
After Silent Spring, environmentalism became a movement to defend and protect the Earth from human damage. With events such as the Earth Day celebration of 1970, led by U.S. Senator Gaylord Nelson, the movement took on an activist approach. With the U.S. government's creation of the Environmental Protection Agency in 1970, environmental regulation was consolidated from various agencies, including the USDA, into one, ending the conflict of having the same people who were responsible for helping farmers to maximize food production also be in charge of protecting the environment. DDT was banned in all domestic uses in 1972, along with numerous other pesticides, avoiding further harm to public and environmental health. Carson was an esteemed marine biologist and celebrated writer, and one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people of the 20th century. Her book, Silent Spring, exposed the profound damage that the overuse of pesticides caused to people and the environment. Rachel Carson's work created public momentum for the modern environmental movement. Silent Spring showed the dangers of indiscriminate pesticide use to the natural world, leading to increased regulation of pesticides and inspiring environmental activism.